Oh, really? Gosh, it's crazy. Time goes by so fast. That is crazy. Oh my gosh, Jeff. Wow. Time flies. Twins are 6. Hannah's turning 9 this week. Yeah. Yeah. That's right. I got home from High Holiday Services, and Hannah goes, I heard you were talking about me. I heard you were crying.
Aww.
Yeah. Yeah. She likes that story. She likes any story I tell about her that's, yeah. Well, Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
Shabbat Shalom.
Everyone. It's good to see all of you. These holidays, this is always quite an incredible time, particularly the Yamim Noraim, this period of 10 days of reflection that we are in from Rosh Hashanah to Yom Kippur. And the Shabbat in between the two, it's known as Shabbat Shuvah. It is a Shabbat in which we consider and we think about our lives, we think about what we want to leave behind and what we want to turn towards. And so the music is a little more reflective this Shabbat of the high holidays and that feeling of the quiet introspection that we all need, particularly at this time. And it's always good to be together and to think about our lives in community and how we live together and work together and how we strive for being better than we are today. It's always good to strive for that. And so we are going to begin our service with Shabbat Shalom, found on page 1, but I think you know the words. Shabbat Shalom.
Let's sing together. Shabbat Shalom. 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 How about as a nigun? Lai, 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 lai. Lai, 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 lai. Lai, 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 lai. Lai, 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 lai. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom.
Well, Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Let us all ascend together as the rabbis of old did when they used to walk up that snake trail in Sfat, as they would sing Lecha Dodi as they went to the Ha'ari synagogue, lifting themselves, but also lifting their spirits and lifting their souls. So let us sing Lecha Dodi on page 3. Should we talk about the bowing to the door? I know there's something
I think that's a nice idea, Rabbi.
You know, one of the things that is a custom, actually, in Lecha Dodi that exists in synagogues all around the world is that as we reach the final verse, people would actually stand and turn towards the entrance in which they came through. And they would bow when we say, Bawi Kala, Bawi Kala. And there's a couple of reasons why we do this. The first is because we're greeting the Sabbath bride, just like the words say. But another reason is that during Kabbalat Shabbat, during our Shabbat service in a way begins with the Baruch Hu, but everything that comes before it is actually like icing on the cake. It's to get us into the spiritual place, into a spiritual mood. And yet, when we have mourners, people who are in mourning, we wouldn't necessarily want to have that freilich, upbeat music for people who didn't feel that sense of spirituality in that moment, in that sense. And so people would actually wait until the end, and then the mourners would enter into the Shabbat service when we would begin with Baruch Hu. Or Chatzi Kaddish and then Baruch Hu. And so as they would walk into the sanctuary, the congregation would turn to them and greet them, in a sense. It's a way to remind us that even in moments where we might feel spiritually uplifted or freilich, we should still remember those who are in pain and those who are suffering. It's a good reminder that we should always carry ourselves with a sense of sensitivity. So as we get to the final verse, when we get to Boi Kala, I invite you to rise and turn to where the entrance in which you came in and bow. We can all do that together, maybe start a new tradition here at Congregation Shalom.
Lecha dodi likrat kala Pnei Shabbat nekabela Lecha dodi likrat kala Pnei Shabbat nekabela Shamo v'zacho b'dibur echad Hishmi'anu el hamiyuchad Adonai echad u'shemo echad L'shem ultiferet v'litila Lecha dodi likrat kala Pnei Shabbat nekabela Lecha dodi likrat kala Pnei Shabbat nekabela Hitoreri Kiva orech kumi ori Uri shir daberi Kevod Adonai alayich nigla Lecha dodi likrat kala Pnei Shabbat nekabela Lecha dodi likrat kala Pnei Shabbat nekabela Boi v'shalom ateret ba'ala Gam b'simcha u'v'tzola Toch emunei am segola Boi chala Lecha dodi likrat kala Pnei Shabbat nekabela Lecha dodi likrat kala Pnei Shabbat nekabela.
You may be seated. You're going to be getting up in just a moment, but you may be seated. We are going to read responsively on page 5. For the good in us which calls us to a better life, we give thanks.
For the strength to improve the world with our hearts and hands, we give praise.
For the peace in us which leads us to work for peace, we are grateful.
For all these we give thanks to the Creator of life and nature.
We continue now with Chatzi Kaddish.
Yitgada ve'yitkada shemei Rabbah B'yalma divra chirutei v'yamlich malchutei B'chayechon v'yomechon ובחיי דכו בית ישראל. בגלה, בגלה, ובזמן קריב, ואמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מברך, לעלם לעולמי עלמיה, יתברך וישתבח, ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא, ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל, שמי דקודשה. בריחו לאלה מן כל ברכתה ושהרתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה, דמירן בעלמה, ואמרו Amen.
We now rise as we turn to the call to worship on page 6.
Baruchu et Adonai HaMevorach. Baruch Adonai HaMevorach le'olam va'ed.
We continue in the Hebrew. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bidvaro ma'ariv aravim b'chochma poteach she'arim uvitvuna meshane itim umachalif et hazmanim umsader et hakochavim b'mishmerotehem berakia kirtzono borei yom v'layla golel or mipnei choshech v'choshech mipnei or uma'avir yom umevi layla Umavdil ben yom uven laila Adonai Sevaot Shemo El Chai v'kayam tamid imloch aleinu le'olam va'ed Baruch atah Adonai Hama'ariv Aravim. We continue now as we read responsively on page 8. How wonderful, O God, are the works of your hands. The heavens declare your glory. The arch of sky displays your handiwork.
In your love you have given us the power to behold the beauty of your world, robed in all its splendor. The sun and the stars, the valleys and hills, the rivers and lakes, all disclose your presence.
The roaring breakers of the sea tell of your awesome might. The beasts of the field and the birds of the air bespeak your wondrous will.
In your goodness you have made us able to hear the music of the world, the raging of the winds, the whisperings of the trees in the wood, and the precious voices of loved ones reveal to us that you are in our midst.
A divine voice sings through all creation. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Hear, O Israel, Adonai is our God, Adonai is one. Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed. Blessed is God's glorious majesty forever and ever.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Le'olam.
May be seated. We continue with Ve'ahavta.
Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavecha u'v'chol nafshecha u'v'chol me'odecha ve'hayu ha'devarim ha'ele asher anochi mitzavecha hayom al levavecha Veshinantam levanecha vidibarta bam beshivtecha beveitecha uvlechtecha vaderech uvshochbecha uvekumecha ukeshartam leot al yadecha vehayu letotafot bein einecha uchetavtam al mezuzot beitecha uvishaarecha למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם.
Adonai Elohechem Emet. We continue now on page 10. High and exalted, great and awesome, God ever humbles the proud, raises the lowly, frees the imprisoned, redeems the afflicted, helps the oppressed, answering our people when we cry out. Praise to God Most High. Blessed is God and deserving of blessing. In great joy, Moses, Miriam, and Israel responded with song to you, all of them proclaiming,
מי כמוך באלים אדוני, מי כמוך נדר בקודש, נורא תהילות עושה פלא. מי כמוך באלים אדוני. מלכותך ראו בניך, בוקעי הים לפני משה ומרים. זה לי ענו ואמרו, אדוני ימלוך לעולם לעולם ועד. מי כמוך באלים אדוני, מי כמוך נהדר בקודש, נורא תהילות עושה פלא. מי כמוך באלים אדוני. ונאמר כי פדה אדוני את יעקב וגאלו מיד חזק ממנו. ברוך אתה אדוני גאל ישראל.
what a lovely Michamocha cantor. I don't think I've heard that before. It's beautiful. It'll soon be a quick favorite here, I'm sure. Let's read responsively at the bottom of page 11. May these hours of rest and renewal open our hearts to joy and our minds to truth.
May all who struggle find rest on this day.
May all who suffer find solace.
May all who hurt find healing on this day.
May all who despair find purpose.
May all who hunger find fulfillment this day.
And may this day fulfill its promise.
Shabbat, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. ובין בני ישראל Rachamim. Asa Adonai et hashamayim ve'et haaretz et hashamayim ve'et haaretz uvayom hashevi uvayom hashevi Shabbat Shabbat Shabbat
As we've sanctified Shabbat, so now do we stand before the throne of God as we rise together for the tefillah.
Adonai sefatai tiftach ufi yagi tehilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu ve'Elohei avoteinu ve'imoteinu Elohei Avraham Elohei Yitzchak ve'Elohei Yaakov Elohei Sarah Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, ve'Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor ve'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, ve'Konei Hakol, וזוכר חסדי אבות ואימהות ומביא גאולה לבני בניהם למען שמו באהבה מלך עוזר ומושיע ומגן ברוך אתה אדוני מגן אברהם ועזרת שרה אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני מחיי הכל אתה רב להושיע מכלכל חיים בחסד, מחיי הכל ברחמים רבים, סומך נופלים ורופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לשעיני עפר. מי כמוך בעל גבורות ומי דומה לך מלך ממית ומחיה ומצמיח ישוע ונאמן אתה להחיות הכל. ברוך אתה אדוני מחיי הכל. אתה קדוש ושמך קדוש, וקדושים בכל יום יהללוך סלע. ברוך אתה אדוני האל הקדוש.
You may be seated. We read responsively on 14, there is holiness when we strive to be true to the best we know.
There is holiness when we are kind to someone who cannot possibly be of service to us.
There is holiness when we forget what divides us and remember what unites us.
There is holiness when we are willing to be laughed at for what we believe in.
There is holiness when we love truly, honestly, and unselfishly.
There is holiness when we remember the lonely and bring cheer into dark corners.
There is holiness when we share our bread, ideas, and our enthusiasm.
There is holiness when we gather to pray to God who gave us the power to pray.
Modim anachnu lach she'atahu Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei avotenu v'imotenu le'olam va'ed. Tzur chayinu magen yishenu atahu l'dor v'ador. We read together, O God of Israel's past, O God of this day, God of all flesh, creator of all life, we praise you, the Most High, for the gift of life. We give thanks, O source of good, that life endures. Eternal and infinite one, help us to use our life for blessing, to live by your law, to do your will, to walk in your way with a whole heart. We thank you, eternal God, for the blessing of life.
Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim Le'olam. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim לעולם, כי אתה הוא מלך אדון לכל השלום, כי אתה הוא מלך אדון לכל השלום, וטוב בעיניך לברך את עמך ישראל בכל עת ובכל שעה בשלומך. ברוך אתה אדוני המברך את עמו ישראל בשלום.
It's good to take time to pray, to think of the need for peace and wholeness in our world. And often our thoughts and our prayers turn to those who we love who might be in need of healing and wholeness at this time. Those who may be in need of a refuat nefesh or refuat guf, a healing of spirit or a healing of body. Particularly in our hearts and minds here at Congregation Shalom, we are thinking of Shendel Bat Frida Malka, Shirley Graham, Laura Bublitz, Keturah Bublitz, Ari Bublitz, Julie Borikoff, Margot Roz, Carol Dubin, Carrie Yudkovich, Otto Feller, Samsara Vizcaya, Sharon Rotman, Eliyahu Ben Max Nemela, Bob Ratke, Lyle Rubel, Mark Cook, Moshe Ben Nechama, Karen Pearson, Jean Bass, Ellen Turner, Judy Weingarten, Myron Dvorkin, Esther Cohen, Lauren Cheris, Matt Cheris, Lisa Furstad, Terry Finch, Vince Tomkowitz, Harav, Ilana Miriam Barchava, Faye Levin, Sarah Rachel Bat Yocheved Alexander, David Feldner, Gili Gollopel, Prue Precourt, Linda Berlin, Alan Elias, Tia Barrett, Wendy Salzberg, Steve Plotkin, Kathy Peltz, Avram Ben Naftali, Neville Sender, Emma and Max, Doug Cruz, Nadiva Sarah bat Liba, Sharon Rothstein, Devorah bat Yehuda Malkus, Judy Naiman, Carol Rovner, David Goldstein, Marilyn Harmon, Mark Berlin, Chris St. Martin, Elaine Keller, Ellen Futterman, Mark Ackerman, Gilbert Offenhartz, and Risa Cyril bat David Vichaya Ita. If there are names that should be added to this list or names that should be pronounced differently than I did, I invite you to hold those names now in your heart as we turn to the words of Mishaberach. Baruch atah Adonai rofei hacholim. We praise you, O God, healer of the sick.
Mishaberach Avoteinu Mikor habracha le'imoteinu. May the source of strength, who blessed the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Mishaberach imoteinu mikor habracha la'avoteinu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of spirit, the renewal of body, and let us say,
With these words of healing still echoing in our hearts and minds, we take this time for silent reflection.
Ose shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'imru above, make peace descend on all of us, and Israel, let us say Amen. Ose shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'imru Amen. May the one who makes peace above make peace descend on all of us, and Israel, let us say Amen. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל, ואמרו אמן, ואמרו אמן, ואמרו אמן.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
Shabbat Shalom.
So like so many of you, I've personally experienced what trauma is like. Sometimes it means that we live in a moment or a day, and we can't seem to escape it. We think about it, and we almost feel as though we're there. Our eyes well up, we remember the smell and the fear and the pleading. I remember that feeling when my daughter was rushed to the emergency room a little over a year ago. And thank God she's all right, but in so many ways, I'm still in that waiting room. No matter how many steps from it I take, in any given moment, I'm right back there. So today is September 10th, Shabbat Shuvah, a time for reflection and a time for change in between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. It's a reminder that we have to take steps into the future, but that doesn't mean we can forget the past. And as we all know, tomorrow is September 11th, 2021. It's hard to believe, it's been 20 years since that day. It's hard to say 2021. I don't know about you, but all this week I've been avoiding the television. In anticipation of this difficult memorial, the news has fed a steady stream of remembrances, and sometimes they're appropriate, and sometimes they don't feel all that right. But in any case, whenever I think about that day, I'm taken right back to those moments of fear and confusion, despair and anger. That's trauma. We all have trauma from that day. And so many have experienced brokenness and loss that can never truly be fixed. So it's hard to be articulate about my feelings about September 11th, 2001. And when I'm in doubt, I look to our Torah or our tradition. This week's Torah portion, Vayelech, begins with Moses telling the people he's 120 years old and cannot enter into the land of their promise with them. He's about to pass from this earth, but Moses isn't focused on his end. He's focused on what comes next for his people. Moses shares a beautiful truth. He tells them that there will be challenges ahead, terrible, difficult challenges, but he says, Chizku ve'imsu al tiru ve'al ta'artzu mipnehem ki. Adonai Elohecha hu ha'holech imach lo yerpecha v'lo yazvecha. Be strong and resolute. Be not in fear or in dread of those challenges. For the eternal your God marches with you. God will not fail you or forsake you. I know that it's sometimes a cliche to say that God will be with you, especially when we're confronted with something as dark or horrendous as the day of September 11th, 2001. But perhaps that isn't the day we should look at. We are reading in the Torah about the loss of our teacher. It was a dark day indeed, but our teacher was looking at the future, the next day, and the days to follow. And I believe that just as we can learn lessons from September 11th, so too can we learn lessons from September 12th, 2001, and September 13th, 2001. For it was in those days the country and the world stood with resolve and comforted one another. I don't think I remember a day that I felt the world more unified than in those days following September 11th. So I'd like to share a story. Here's a quick one from October 11th, 2001, a month following the destruction of the Twin Towers. The recovery workers pulled a survivor of sorts from the rubble. It was a pear tree that stood on the grounds of the World Trade Center, and it was extensively damaged with its roots and limbs snapped and its trunks blackened and burned. And the tree was placed in the care of the New York City Department of Parks and Recreation and was nursed back to health. It survived so well that in 2010, the tree was brought to the September 11th memorial site and is now known as the Survivor Tree. Today, the tree stands next to the South Pool as a living reminder of resilience and survival and hope. And in 2013, the September 11th Memorial and Museum launched the Survivor Tree Seedling Program. Each year, the September 11th Memorial gives seedlings from the survivor tree to 3 communities that have endured tragedy in recent years. So seedlings were donated to Parkland, Florida, at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School. They went to London in memory of those who lost their lives and on behalf of the bereaved survivors of all those affected by the tragic Grenfell Tower fire, and to Puerto Rico after the catastrophic Hurricane Maria left an estimated 2,975 people dead in its wake. And each of these communities has faced the unimaginable. Past recipient Orlando, Florida planted their seedlings at the Harry P. Lou Gardens in memory of the 49 people killed and 58 injured at Pulse nightclub on June 12, 2016. And each recipient is committed to nurture their survivor tree seedlings so that one day they too will stand as beacons of resilience and hope in their community. The seedlings are a reminder that healing is possible with time, hope, and unity. This story and this tree embodies the nation's spirit and strength. This one-of-a-kind tree stands out from the rest of the trees at the September 11th Memorial. In the spring, it's the first to bud and the last to lose its leaves in the fall. And this is according to the September 11th Memorial Museum site. The story of this pear tree is a story of tragedy, and yet it seeks to create sacred and positive meaning. Not meaning that can explain the tragedy, but meaning that can explain our humanity in the face of tragedy. Today, some of you might know that Apple released a play on television called Come From Away. And many of you know it or have seen it either in New York City or when it traveled to Milwaukee. As a congregation, we went to go see it. It's the story of the town of Gander, Newfoundland, that took in thousands of stranded passengers that landed and were forced to spend days there until the airspace was reopened and people could return home. It's a story of humanity's light amidst the terrible darkness. It was a remarkable story of human compassion and kindness. I even considered showing it at services tonight because I think it's so important. Because I think it is essential to the September 11th story, not just because I'm personally proud of it for obvious reasons, but because this story is in itself a memorial and an affirmation that within us is extraordinary goodness. This story, like the pear tree, is an example of what it means when kindness can take root. And so on this Shabbat Shuvah, we'll mark and remember the horror of the events of September 11th, but so too should we cast our eyes upon the stories of September 12th. Moses cast his eyes upon the days after the tragic end of his life. He said, "Be strong and resolute, be not in fear or in dread of the challenges that come. For the eternal your God marches with you. God will not fail you or forsake you." If we need to find God in the midst of our troubles, let us look to each other, for we bear the imprint of the divine, and our hands and our hearts are what we need right now. I'd like to conclude with the words of Rabbi Aaron Benjamin Bisno. I think I've pronounced his name correctly. It was written after the events of September 11th, and I find them meaningful and consoling. It's called Repairing the Fabric. One of the traditional Jewish acts of mourning is the tearing of our clothes, the performance of which is called kriya, literally tear in Hebrew. By ripping the fabric of a lapel, a pocket, a sleeve, or a black ribbon opposite our hearts, we acknowledge through a physical act of tearing the emotional and psychic sundering death brings. In response to the loss, fury, and sorrow we experience as we process grief, in response to what our president has called our quiet, unyielding anger at the upending of our world, Jewish tradition decrees we rend the fabric of our garments, that we might thereby be returned in some small measure to wholeness. But what shall we do when it is the fabric of our society and world that is rent? What should we do when it is the rending that is the cause of and not the response to our grief? What shall we do then? How shall we react when the way we understood the world and our place within it is today rendered unrecognizable and we cannot go back to the way it ever was? What do we tear then? And how do we begin to make our world whole again? Perhaps an answer can be found in the story of the young student who found a large map of the world in the newspaper. Curious, the student took the map to his teacher, and seeing an opportunity to challenge the student, the teacher took the map of the globe and tore it into many pieces. Fragments of paper fell to the floor at the student's feet. And then, handing over a roll of tape, the teacher challenged the student to reassemble the map of the world, and then the teacher returned to work. The student dropped to the floor and in short order completed the assignment by correctly taping together each of the pieces of the whole of the world, where only minutes before the image of the world we believed we had known so well was torn asunder and strewn across the floor, now was being offered up as an intact whole. When the teacher asked the student how it had been possible to reassemble the fragmented world so quickly, the response was short and to the point. There was a picture of a person on the backside. I repaired that one person, and the whole world got fixed too. Some of us have seen this story. So may we commemorate this day for the tearing, but let us place hope in the mending as well, the saplings planted in new earth, and the promise that comes when we look to the days to come. Let us remember September 11th, but let us remember September 12th and 13th and the 14th and beyond. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Gemar Chatima Tova. May you all be inscribed for a good, happy, and healthy new year.
The following is, sorry, Paul, just one second. The following is I'll call it an adaptation of a song from the show Come From Away, which is called Prayer. Make me a channel of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me bring your love. Where there is injury, your pardon, Lord. And where there's doubt, true faith in you. Make me a channel of your peace. Where there's despair in life, let me bring hope. Where there is darkness, only light. And where there's sadness, oh, say shalom bimromav. Hu yaseh shalom aleinu. Ve'al kol Yisrael. Ve'imru Amen. Yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. O Master, grant that I may never seek so much to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to loved with all soul. Make me a channel of your peace. Where there's despair in life, let me bring hope. Where there is darkness, only light. And where there's sadness, ever joy.
It wasn't more than a week ago that I turned to the cantor and said, there's this beautiful song that would be really lovely for a remembrance of September 11th. And cantor, to be able to do that, and Paul, you too, in less than a week is extraordinary. And thank you for all of your gifts, not just the gifts of music, but the gifts of your sensitivity and thoughtfulness. Appreciate you doing that. So we are going to continue on praising the goodness and affirming the goodness that exists in our world as we turn to Aleinu, which can be found on page 18. And it's a joy to call upon Jim and Judy Silverman to step forward and open up our ark doors as we turn from these words and music, these poignant words of music of hope. We think of the two of you as well and all the goodness that you bring to our community and our congregation. Please rise now as we turn to Aleinu, which can be found on page 18.
Aleinu l'shabeach la'adon hakol, la'tei gedula le'yotze breshit, shelo asanu kegoye ha'aratzot, velo samanu kemishbechot ha'adama, shelo sam chelkeinu kahem, vegor aleinu kechol hamonam. ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני ושמו אחד ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני
Thank you, Jim and Judy. Gmar Chatima Tova. May you be inscribed for a sweet, happy, and healthy new year. Please be seated. We turn now in our Siddur to page 20 as we think of loved ones and dear ones who have passed into life eternal. Particularly in our hearts and minds, we are thinking of Stephen Levy. In addition to his name, too, we think of those whom we are commemorating the period of Shloshim. We think of Mark Ackerman from Orlando, Florida, not our congregant, Mark Ackerman. We think of Ed Osner and Stella Burton, Adrian Katradimos, Joan Levine, Bertrand Lubell Stolzer, Norman Sheminsky, and Gerald Zupnik. In addition to those names, we remember these dear people for whom we mark their yahrzeit this evening. And though the sun has set upon their lives, we still experience the afterglow of their memories as it warms our hearts and our souls during this period of these days of awe. We think of Jane Allen, David Bauman, Mary Baer, Sam Berlin, Phyllis Holzman Bernstein, Ruth Bernstein, Joseph Blatt, Leila Goldsmith-Brasner, Elizaveto Chernaya, Ruth Kogan, Saul T. Cohen, Benjamin Davis, Eva Dietz, Jean Dolgan, Sam Essick, Bessie Feldberg, Anna Feller, Pearl Fishman, Sidney Fox, Joey Friedman, Bernard Gale, Max Gellis, Nathan Genlin, Rita Goldberg, Rachel Goldman, Donald Gould, Jack Ranoff, Bernice Gratch, Robin Gratch, Phyllis Greenberg, Victor Robert Green, Marion Hahn, S. Roger Hirsch, Joseph Hoffman, Milton Holzman, Phyllis Holzman, Ida Smith Horowitz, Melba Howenstein, Esther Huxley, Miriam Kahn, Eugene Klurfeld, Bertha Kniaz, J. Stewart Codner, Susan Carol Cope, Ruth Cosberg, Lionel Lee, Michael S. Lennett, June Beverly Lococo, Rose London, Molly Mahler, Suzanne Marshak, Lawrence J. Meldman, Rose Meldman, Stanley Mendelson, Alice Mayer, Chad Michelo, George Meckler, Paul Moskowitz, Edith Ort, William Ostak, Sylvia Freed Pash, Morris Pivar, Sheldon Plotkin, Saul Pollock, Benjamin Resnick, Edward Rosenberg, Rose Sampson, Rachel Sapiro, Elaine Schwartz, Erwin Schwartz, Sam Seaman, Karen Schlensky, Philip Sklar, Rose Starren, Raymond Strauss, Lois Taus, Leonard David Vogel, Dora Weinstein, Dr. Harvey Wickman. If there are names that should be added to this list or any names that should be pronounced differently than I did, please call those names out loud as I look in your direction.
Rita Newman.
Sorry?
Rita Newman.
May her memory be a blessing. May his memory be a blessing. In addition to the names of all of our dear ones, so too do we think of all those who have died due to war and or terrorism. We think of all those who have died due to this terrible virus that has stricken our world. We think of all those who have died due to the virus of xenophobia. We also think of all those who died in defense of our nation and allied nations, and we think of all those who perished during the Holocaust. Of course, on this Shabbat, as we always do, we remember those who perished on September 11th, 2001. Our griefs and sympathies are mingled as we turn to the words of Kaddish Yatom, the Mourner's Kaddish, on page 20. Please rise. Yit Gadal v'yit Kadash Shmei Rabbah, v'yalma divrach chirutei v'yamlich malchutei, b'chayechon uv'yomechon uv'chayei d'chol Beit Yisrael, ba'agala uv'yizman kari v'yimru Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabbah mevorach leolam ulamei amaya. Yit barach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh. V'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal Shmei Kudusha brichu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata. Tushbechata v'nechemata. Da'amiran b'alma v'yimru Amen. Yehei Shlama Rabbah min Shemaya. V'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru Amen. Oseh shalom b'imromav, hu yaseh shalom. Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru Amen. May the source of peace and peace to all who mourn and comfort to all who are bereaved. And let us say, Amen. Please be seated. In our tradition, we always turn to light. We turn away from darkness and turn to the lights that exist within our lives. It's a joy now to call upon Brent Arnold, who's a light within our congregation, to share announcements on our congregation's behalf. Shabbat Shalom, Brent.
Thank you, Rabbi. Good Shabbos.
Good Shabbos.
I want to wish you all a very happy and healthy new year. Thank you so much to our wonderful staff and clergy for making this a very meaningful Rosh Hashanah holiday. Although we had all hoped to see more people in the seats here in our sanctuary, we had a really great turnout at our Apples and Honey family service outside of Doctors Park this weekend. And on YouTube, our Erev Rosh Hashanah service also received over 1,100 views. It is also so great to gather once again with our clergy for our Tashlich service. That was really nice. We look forward to seeing you all again on Wednesday evening, September 15th at 6 o'clock or at 8:30 p.m. for our Kol Nidre services. Our Yom Kippur Day service will be on Thursday, September 16th. It's one service at 9 o'clock in the morning here in our sanctuary. Our Yom Kippur family service will then take place at Doctors Park on Thursday morning at 11:30. Our Yom Kippur study session will be online at 2:30 p.m. and the reading of Jonah will also take place virtually at 3:30. Then the Yizkor and Elah service will conclude Thursday here at 4:30 p.m. I look forward to bringing all our students back to Shalom for religious school, which begins on Sunday, September 19th, coming up. On Erev Sukkot, which is Monday, September 20th at 5:45, there will be a service in the Werner family sukkah. So please RSVP to Abby for that. And then on Sunday, September 26th at 3 o'clock in the afternoon will be a family religious school day at the JCC's Rainbow Day Camp, where we will celebrate consecration and Simchas Torah. There are a lot of great upcoming reasons to join us at Congregation Shalom. We look forward to seeing you at any one of these great services or programs. I want to conclude tonight in commemoration of 20 years since the terrifying, awful day of September 11th. And just like Rabbi had mentioned, I vividly recall in 2001 High Holy Day services, just afterwards, as Rabbi Ron addressed our congregation from right here. And then our Shalom choir was just over here and started the service with an amazing, charismatic chanting of God Bless America. I'm sure some of you were in the room for that. That is a memory here that will stick with me forever. 20 years later now, I pray that we can find the same unity to help our country overcome this awful pandemic. From the bottom of my heart, I want to wish you and your families a very happy and a healthy new year. Shana Tova.
Shana Tova. Thank you.
We are going to turn now to the candle lighting, which can be found on page 22. There was a beautiful prayer that was written by Rabbi Zoe Klein that linked Shabbat to Kaddish, in a sense. It's difficult sometimes to hear this, but it's important that we remember. On Shabbat, we would light 2 candles, one for remembering Shabbat and one for observing Shabbat. Tonight, we light 2 candles. This one is for Building 1 and one for Building 2, one for the Pentagon and one for Pittsburgh, one for American airline flights and one for the United Airline flights, this one for the hundreds of firefighters and this one for the hundreds of police, this one for all the men and this one for all the women, this one for all the girls and this one for all the boys, this one for our luck running out, this one for the New York skyline, this one for the walking wounded, this one for the critically wounded, this one for the survivors, this one for the dead, this candle for Building 1, and this candle for Building 2. And just to add to Rabbi Zoe Klein's poem, let us also light one to remembrance and one to life, as we rise now together, as we kindle these lights.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav,
וציוונו להדליק נר של שבת.
And Cantor, would you lead us in the Kiddush, which can be found on page 23?
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu v'shabbat kodsho be'ahava uvratzon hinchilanu zikaron lemaaseh v'reshit ki hu yom techila lemikra'e kodesh zecher litziat mitzrayim kivanu v'acharta ve'otanu kidashta mikol ha'amim v'shabbat kodshecha be'ahava uvratzon hinchaltanu. Baruch atah Adonai mekadesh HaShabbat.
Amen.
L'chaim.
L'chaim. Oh, yeah. Age does that, right? And so we are now going to turn to our closing hymn for this Shabbat, which I believe is Adon Olam. As we think about the master of the world, that which causes the world in order and all the goodness to exist in life, let us return to that power, that goodness that lies within.
Adon Olam Asher Malach B'terem Kol Yitzir Nivra Le'ed Nasa V'cheftzol Kol Azai Melech Shemo Nikra Ve'yacharei Kichlot HaKol Levado Yimloch Nora Ve'hu Haya Ve'hu Hoveh Ve'hu Yiyeh B'tifara Ve'hu Echad Ve'ein Sheni Lehamshilo Lehachbira Beli Reshit Beli Tachlit Ve'lo Ha'oz Ve'hamisra Ve'hu Eli Ve'chai Goali Ve'tzorchet Li Beitzara Ve'hu Nisi Umanos Li Menat Kosi B'yom Ekra B'yado Avkid Ruchi Be'edishan Be'aira Be'imruchi Keviyati Adonai Li Velo Ira.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
Shabbat Shalom. Thank you, Paul.